He only came back to grab a folder, that's all. A quick stop between flights, in and out, like always. But the second Jack Edward opened the door, he stopped breathing. There in the living room, his sons, Finn and Liam, were curled into the lap of the maid, eyes closed, smiles soft, cheeks pressed to hers like they'd always belonged there. No cameras had prepared him for this, no staff reports, no quiet updates from the housekeeper. What he saw broke him, not with rage, not with fear, but with the sudden ache of realizing he hadn't been here, not in the room, not in their lives, not in his own heart. And what was worse, they were finally okay, without him. Grief didn't just visit Jack, it gutted him. When Melissa died, something in him went dark, still walking, still breathing, but gone. He stopped listening, stopped showing up, stopped believing that anything tender could survive a world so cruel. So he did what men like Jack knew how to do. He worked, he left, he built distance between himself and the ache. Trips turned into escapes, meetings became his medicine. Every flight away from home was one more mile between him and the life he no longer knew how to hold. The house ran like a machine, quiet, clean, empty. He hired everyone money could find, but no one stayed. Not because they weren't skilled, but because you can't fix a soul with checklists. And then came Christine James. She wasn't loud, she wasn't trained in trauma. She just came when they called and stayed when they asked her not to leave. And somehow, God used her silence like a song. That day, when Jack walked in and saw his sons wrapped in her arms, their tiny hands clutching her shirt like it was the only safe place in the world, something cracked. Because for the first time in months, he saw peace. Not the kind you schedule, not the kind you earn, but the kind God places quietly in the hands of those who show up and stay. Jack didn't say a word. He couldn't. He just stood there, phone still in hand, world still spinning. And in that quiet, God whispered to his heart the one thing he'd stopped believing. This is still your home, but first, you have to come back. Before we begin this story, can I ask you something? When was the last time you stopped running? Stopped pretending you were okay? Stopped long enough to feel what you've buried? If you've ever walked through grief, if you've ever felt lost inside your own home, if you've ever wondered if God could still reach you after everything you've shut down, then this story is for you. Click subscribe, like this video, and tell us where in the world you're watching from. And as you watch, I pray something in this story reminds you, God doesn't need you to be perfect. He just wants you to come back, even if it's messy, even if it's broken, even if all you can do is stand in the doorway and cry. Let's begin. The wheels of the black sedan hadn't even cooled when Jack Edward stepped out, suit jacket still creased from the plane, eyes blank from the boardroom. It was supposed to be a 48-hour trip, but somewhere between Chicago and the silence he carried inside him, Jack had lost count. He didn't call ahead, didn't text the staff, didn't even tell the driver he was coming back. He just showed up, like a ghost re-entering his own home. The door opened with its usual hiss of automation. Same marble floor, same polished air, same emptiness. He didn't expect anything to be different, and maybe that was the problem. Jack walked through the entryway with the same half-scrolling thumb and dead-eyed focus he used in meetings, one step ahead of feeling, always one step removed from where he was. Until he heard it. A sound he hadn't heard in months, maybe longer. It wasn't music, not exactly. It was humming, low, gentle, untrained. The kind of sound a person makes when they think no one is listening. He turned the corner, half expecting a broken speaker or a forgotten TV, and then he saw them, his sons, Finn and Liam, one on each knee, tiny fingers tangled in her apron, their faces tucked into either side of Christine's neck. Smiling, smiling, not wild, not manic, not desperate for attention, just content, like they were right where they belonged. Christine didn't notice him. Her head was slightly bowed, humming a tune no one taught her. Just something she must have made up. Her arms were wrapped around the boys, not tight, but firm, like she knew they'd fall apart if she let go too soon. Jack froze in the doorway, not in anger, not even in confusion, just stillness. The kind that comes when your soul recognizes something your brain hasn't caught up to yet. He didn't speak, didn't move. He simply watched. The boys breathed in sync with her chest, every rise and fall, every tiny sigh of safety, as if they'd found something sacred, and decided to stay. Something inside Jack cracked, quietly, not like glass, more like ice melting around the edges. He hadn't seen them like this since Melissa died, maybe not even before that, and God help him, he wasn't sure if he felt relief or grief or shame. Maybe all three. He looked down, realized his hand was still clenched around his phone. An unread message from a venture partner blinked at him. He didn't open it. He just turned slowly, backed out of the room like someone who'd walked into a chapel mid-prayer. No one had seen him, but something had seen him. He felt it. Upstairs, the hallway stretched longer than usual. He passed Melissa's music room without looking in, past the empty nursery chair he never sat in. He entered his office, but didn't sit. Just stood in front of the tall window, looking out across the cold, perfect lawn. A man with everything, and nothing. The silence in the house had always been his sanctuary, his fortress, his deal with the grief. But now it felt like judgment. Like every square inch of marble echoed a question he'd been avoiding. Where were you? Where were you when the boys cried in the night? When they reached for someone who wouldn't disappear by morning? Where were you when love asked for presence, not performance? Jack closed his eyes, and for the first time in months he didn't hear numbers or deadlines. He heard her, Christine, humming, steady, unhurried. He didn't know what song it was. Maybe it wasn't one. Maybe it was just a sound she made to tell two little boys, "You're safe now." And somehow, in a way he couldn't explain, he knew it wasn't just for them. It was for him, too. She hadn't seen him in the doorway, hadn't heard the soft click of the front door behind him. But still, she held them, still humming, still here. And as Jack turned away, quietly, almost reverently, something inside him whispered what he didn't yet know how to say, "Don't leave." That night Jack stood over the sink long after the dishes had been cleared. He hadn't touched his dinner, didn't remember sitting down. The house had grown quiet again, but this silence wasn't clean anymore. It was thick, full of questions he wasn't ready to ask. Christine was somewhere down the hall, settling the boys for bed. She always moved quietly, like someone who knew the cost of peace and didn't want to waste it. Jack stared out the kitchen window. It was raining lightly, the kind of soft drizzle that barely kissed the glass but carried its own kind of ache. He didn't usually notice things like that, but tonight he did. Earlier, he had reviewed the security footage. He didn't know why. Maybe he needed proof that what he saw was real. Maybe he needed a reason to feel angry. He clicked through the hours he'd been away, expecting something. What he found was silence, not emptiness, but peace. Christine reading to the boys in the living room. No big voices, no overstimulated noise, just quiet rhythm. She didn't force them to sit. She didn't demand focus. She waited until one of them crawled closer on his own, and then the other followed. She turned the pages slowly. Even when they lost interest, she kept reading aloud, her voice steady, as if presence mattered more than performance. In another clip, Liam cried when Finn took his toy. Christine didn't correct, didn't scold. She bent down, eye level, and whispered something he couldn't hear. Liam stopped crying, not because he was told to, but because he was understood. Jack clicked out of the footage, closed the laptop, pushed it to the other end of the desk like it had said something he wasn't ready to hear. He couldn't stop thinking about one thing. What if all this time he'd been giving his children structure but not love? What if love looked different now? Messier, quieter, softer than he knew how to be. Later that evening, he knocked gently on the boy's door. It wasn't something he did. Christine opened it halfway. Her voice was low. "They're asleep." He nodded, unsure why he'd come. Her apron was folded over one arm, her shoes already off. Hair tied back loosely, a smudge of flour on her wrist. She didn't look like someone important. She looked like someone willing. That unsettled him more than he could say. "I watched the footage," he said. Christine didn't flinch. "I know," she replied, with a strange kind of peace. "You always do." He should have been offended. He wasn't. Jack looked at the floor, then back at her. "They're close to you." She nodded. "I know." "And you never crossed a line?" Her eyes met his, warm, clear, not defensive. "I didn't draw any," she said. "I just stayed when they asked me not to leave." It was such a simple sentence, but it hit him like a weight he didn't see coming. She didn't push her way in. She didn't perform motherhood. She just stayed. And somehow staying had rewritten the atmosphere of a house built on grief. The next morning, Jack typed something, a document, household policy revision. He listed rules, logical ones, professional boundaries, no personal involvement, no emotional dependency, no bedtime singing, no calling staff by affectionate names. At the bottom, he added, "Maintain structure at all times." He paused, stared at that line like it meant something holy. It didn't. He emailed it to Christine. Subject line, "Protocol effective immediately." She found it that afternoon, read it quietly in the laundry room, beneath the hum of the dryer. The light above her flickered a little. She didn't cry, didn't sigh. She just pulled a pen from her apron pocket, folded the printed copy back neatly, and scribbled one line beneath his signature space. "Structure only works when someone stays." Then she left it on the edge of his desk, beside a cooled cup of coffee he'd forgotten to drink. That night she followed the rules. She didn't sing, didn't kneel to meet the boys' eyes, didn't hold their hands when they whimpered in their sleep. By dinner, Liam was in tears. Finn had spilled juice and refused to be comforted. Jack watched from the hallway. Christine sat still on the couch, present but quiet. No rebellion, no reaction, just stillness. And even in that stillness, Jack saw it. She wasn't obeying. She was showing him something. He just didn't know what yet. That night, the house didn't rest. Not really. The lights dimmed, the doors closed, but the air still felt wrong. Too still, too clean, too quiet in all the places where love used to live. Christine folded laundry with the same steady hands, not because the rules deserved obedience, but because the boys still needed someone who wouldn't leave. And Jack. Jack sat in his office, staring at the line she'd written across his rules. Structure only works when someone stays. He read it again, then again, and still. He couldn't answer it. The memo was taped to the fridge before breakfast, crisp white paper, perfect black ink, signed with Jack's initials at the bottom like a contract he couldn't break. Christine read it in silence, her fingers smoothing the edge of the page once. Then again. No personal affection, no unnecessary contact, no humming, no emotional dependency. Maintain professional distance at all times. The list ended with one line. Structure is stability. She didn't say a word, just turned toward the counter, picked up the boys' breakfast bowls and carried them to the table with the same calm hands. But her silence felt different that morning. Not empty, just restrained. Finn and Liam were already waiting, still in their pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. Liam had his sock on backwards. Christine noticed, but she didn't kneel to fix it. She placed their bowls gently on the table. Oatmeal, 2 spoons, no fruit this time. And then she stood. Not close, not far, just present, like a lighthouse seen across fog. "Eat while it's warm," she said softly. The boys blinked up at her. Finn reached toward her scarf, the green one she always wore. She stepped back. "No touching, sweetheart," she said, then paused, correcting herself. "Finn." Upstairs, Jack stood by the railing, watching. He could hear everything. The quiet clinks of spoons, the absence of song. It was working. The house was calm, orderly, and yet something inside him felt colder than it had the night before. Later, Christine found the twins in the hallway outside the playroom. They weren't fighting. They weren't laughing. They were just sitting there, shoulder to shoulder, backs pressed against the wall. Liam looked up at her. He didn't cry. He didn't ask. He just looked, like he was waiting for something he no longer had the words to ask for. She sat near them, not with them. She didn't sing. She didn't reach for them. She just stayed, quiet, compliant, still. By lunchtime, the silence had thickened. It wasn't peaceful anymore. Christine served sandwiches without humming, without the usual stories she told about clouds or birds or basil seeds. Finn didn't touch his plate. Liam whispered something, but not to anyone in particular. Jack sat at the far end of the table, phone beside him, unread emails open. He watched them, and for a split second he saw it. His sons, frozen in a house that was too clean to hold them. That evening, Christine slipped a folded piece of paper onto Jack's desk, the same memo, her handwriting beneath his signature. Just one line. Structure only works when someone stays. She didn't knock. She didn't ask to explain. She left it there and walked away. That night, Jack didn't sleep. He lay in bed with the lights off, the silence humming in his ears. He could still see Liam's hand reaching across the table that morning. No one had taken it. Not her. Not him. He hadn't even moved. He turned to the side. Melissa's pillow was still there, still untouched after all these months. He used to think it was a way to honor her. Now he wondered if it was just another way to run. At 2:17 a.m., he found himself in the hallway again, drawn by something he couldn't name. He stopped outside the nursery, didn't open the door, didn't knock. He just stood there, heart tight, breath shallow. Inside, the boys were asleep. Christine sat on the floor beside them, back against the crib, her scarf around her neck again. She was humming, soft, steady. The tune barely touched the air. But it was there. She had broken the rules. And Jack was glad she did. The memo was still taped to the fridge, untouched, unread, unfelt. But in the nursery, where two small boys slept without fear and a woman hummed songs that had no name, a different kind of rule was being written, one made of breath, of presence, of grace. And Jack, still standing at the door, knew this time he wasn't looking at a breach of order. He was looking at something that might save them all. Jack watched more now. Not from behind emails, not through camera feeds, but with his eyes. His own eyes. Noticing things he hadn't noticed before, like how Liam pressed his thumb against the edge of the table when he was scared, or how Finn paused mid-step when someone raised their voice, even a little. He wasn't sure when he'd stopped looking, but now he couldn't stop. Christine had started singing again, not always, not loudly, but just enough. Soft melodies in the hallway, half-hummed lullabies while folding clothes, songs with no name, no words, just warmth. She never asked permission, and Jack never told her to stop. One evening, he stood just outside the kitchen. She didn't know he was there. Finn had spilled juice. A slow orange stream across the floor. Liam looked ready to panic, lower lip trembling, hands clenched into his shirt. Christine didn't scold. She didn't rush. She crouched down to the boy's level, voice steady. "Let's breathe," she whispered. "Big belly breaths, okay? In and out." Liam mirrored her. Finn followed. 3 breaths, 4, 5. The room calmed. Then, without a word, Christine handed Finn a small towel, held his hand over the mess, and waited. He wiped it once, then again. She nodded. "That's it. We clean up together." Not Jack because blinked. It was profound, but because it was so simple. No lectures, no fear, no raised tones, just presence. Later that night, he stood at the bottom of the stairs, one hand resting on the banister. Diane passed behind him with a laundry basket, her steps slow. "You've been quiet," she said gently. Jack didn't answer right away. Then, finally, "She never raises her voice." Diane nodded. "Doesn't have to." Jack looked up the stairs toward the nursery, then back at the empty hallway. "She never tries to be their mother." "No," Diane said, setting the basket down. "She just loves them like someone who remembers what it's like to be small." The next afternoon, Christine asked for 10 minutes of his time at the dining room table. No contracts, no staff in sight, just paper, a pen, a cup of tea between them. "I've drawn up a structure," she said quietly. Jack lifted an eyebrow. "For what?" "For the house," she replied. "But not just the house, for the people in it." She slid the paper toward him. It wasn't complicated. A weekly rhythm, simple roles for each staff member, clear breaks, boundaries, and one request, written at the bottom in calm, clean handwriting. "One night a week you're here, not as the boss, as their father." Jack stared at the page, the weight of those words pressed into his chest. He looked up. Christine met his eyes. No challenge, no push, just stillness. He cleared his throat. "That's ambitious." Christine's mouth curved slightly. "So are your quarterly projections." He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no. And somehow, that was enough for now. That evening, he found Finn sitting near the windowsill, a coloring book open but untouched. Christine was in the kitchen, her back turned, humming again. Jack walked over slowly, sat on the floor beside his son. Finn didn't look up, but he leaned gently into Jack's side, just enough to be felt, not enough to make a sound. Jack didn't speak, didn't move away, just sat there for a while. And that was new. Later that night, Christine wiped down the chalkboard in the kitchen. The day's notes were smudged, faint. She picked up a piece of white chalk, hesitated, then wrote 3 small words across the top. "Still watching, still learning." She didn't sign her name. She didn't need to. And upstairs, where Jack sat beside 2 sleeping boys, the window cracked just enough to let the night air in. He knew what those words meant. They weren't for the house. They were for him. It started with a photo. Blurry. Off-center. Taken through the hedge by someone walking their dog on a Sunday morning. Christine, kneeling in the garden, her hands covered in soil. Finn, laughing as he painted a rock with blue and green swirls. Liam beside her, holding a tiny watering can like it was holy. The light had been soft that day. Spring air still cool, sky wide and forgiving. Christine's scarf had slipped halfway from her neck, resting on her shoulder like it belonged there. And they looked happy, not posed, just safe. By Monday morning, the photo had been shared 11,000 times. Billionaire's maid plays mom. Tech CEO's twins find comfort in unlikely caregiver. Inside the Edward estate, where is their father? The words didn't bother Jack at first. He didn't even read them. He saw the picture, he recognized the moment, and it hurt. How beautiful it was. Because he hadn't been in it. Christine found out by accident. A phone left unlocked on the laundry counter. Diane's screen lit up with a headline before it dimmed. Christine didn't react right away, just stared at the screen as the dryer hummed beside her, soft and steady. She touched the scarf at her shoulder, not for comfort, just to feel something grounded. That afternoon the house felt different. The walls hadn't changed, but the quiet had. It wasn't peace anymore, it was caution. Jack called a meeting. The PR team suggested a statement. "We'll clarify her role," someone said. "Reframe the narrative," another added. "Protect the family brand." Jack stared at the table, at words that had nothing to do with what mattered. He stood, left the meeting without speaking. Later, he found Christine in the garden. She was planting basil with the boys. Liam sat in the dirt, barefoot, humming softly. Finn had placed 2 painted stones at the base of a tomato stem. Jack watched from the edge of the patio, not stepping in, not interrupting, just watching. When the boys went inside for snacks, Christine remained, brushing soil from her hands. "You saw it?" she asked quietly, still facing the garden. "I did." She nodded. So did everyone else. A pause. Jack stepped closer, still not near enough to touch it. This moment, this woman, this wound. They want a statement, he said. Christine finally looked up. And what will it say? Jack hesitated. That you're the help, that I'm aware, that it's being addressed. Christine nodded again, but her eyes, they didn't agree. I didn't ask for attention, she said, and I never asked to be their mother. I know, Jack replied. She stood wiping her palms on her apron. Her voice was low but steady. They just needed someone to stay when everyone else left. Jack swallowed. The air felt thick. They don't see that, she added. They see a headline, a mistake. You're not a mistake, he said quietly. That night, Jack sat on the edge of his bed, laptop open, PR statement blank. He typed something, deleted it, typed again, deleted again. Finally, he shut the screen. The silence in the room felt louder than ever. He didn't want to protect his image. He wanted to protect them. The next morning, the headlines hadn't stopped, but neither had Christine. She made pancakes, cut fruit, braided Liam's hair when he asked, lopsided, messy, perfect. Jack watched her from the hallway. She looked tired, but not defeated. The boys didn't know about the internet, about shame, about optics. They only knew the scarf still smelled like lavender, and her lap still felt like home. That evening, Christine didn't hum. She just rocked gently in the nursery chair, Liam curled against her chest, Finn asleep at her feet on a folded blanket. Jack stood in the doorway, not hidden this time. He was there, really there. He didn't speak, didn't plan, just watched the way her fingers moved. Slow, steady, like someone who knew how to hold a storm without trying to stop the rain. It started with Liam's cough, soft, harmless, barely more than a whisper in the night. Then came Finn's shiver, the kind that made Christine stop mid-step in the hallway, because something in her, something from long ago, recognized that sound. By midnight, both boys were burning up, skin flushed, breaths shallow, their tiny bodies too still. Jack stood at the door to the nursery, eyes wide, arms stiff at his sides, like a man facing a storm with nothing in his hands. Christine didn't panic. She moved calmly, quietly, placing cool cloths on their foreheads, checking pulses, whispering comfort like a prayer she knew by heart. When Finn whimpered in his sleep, she leaned in. "I'm here," she breathed. "I'm still here." Jack watched. Something in his chest tightened. Not panic, not control, helplessness, the kind he had no system for. At 2:08 a.m., he finally stepped in, stiff, unsure, eyes hollow. "What do I do?" he asked. Christine didn't look up. She just handed him a wet cloth and pointed to Finn's cheek. "Cool him gently. Keep your hand steady." He knelt, awkward, like his knees forgot how to hold weight. His hands shook. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered. Christine didn't correct him. She didn't fill the space with reassurance. She just said the words that mattered. "You don't have to know. You just have to stay." The room was warm, dim. Liam stirred in his fever sleep. Jack reached for him, and the boy, barely conscious, turned toward the sound of his father's breath. Not his words, not his touch, just the breath. Jack sat down hard on the floor and didn't leave. At 3:17 a.m., Christine leaned back against the wall. The boys were still burning, but their breathing had steadied. Jack's shirt was damp with sweat. One of the twins had curled into his lap, the other against Christine's shoulder. And in that small, heavy room, something broke. Not the fever. Jack. Quietly. Finally. He bowed his head, pressed his hand against his eyes, and let the grief come. Not loud, not messy, just real. The tears weren't for Melissa. They were for everything that came after, the numbness, the silence, the way he'd left the house but never really left the pain. Christine looked over, didn't say anything, just reached across the rug and placed her hand over his, not as comfort, but as permission. "You're allowed to feel this, and still stay." By dawn, the fevers began to drop. The room smelled of lemon balm and damp cloth. Sunlight touched the windows without asking for anything. Christine sat in the rocker, eyes closed, one hand resting on Liam's back. Jack hadn't moved. Finn was still asleep against his chest. The world was quiet, but not empty. Later, Christine walked into the kitchen. She didn't speak, didn't make noise. She picked up a piece of chalk and wrote 3 words on the board above the stove. Everyone stayed. No signature, no explanation, just that. Jack stood in the hallway, watching her hand leave the board. He felt something rise in his chest, small, unfamiliar. Not relief, not pride. Something softer, like belief. Beginning again. The house had never been this quiet, not even after the funeral. But this silence didn't feel like absence, it felt like surrender, like presence that no longer needed to be explained. And as Jack turned back toward the nursery, his sleeves still damp, his chest still aching, he whispered to no one in particular, "I stayed." As if saying it out loud might make it real. The fever broke, but something else stayed broken. Not in the boys, not in Christine, in Jack. The morning after, the house moved slowly. No meetings, no press calls, no scheduling apps buzzing. Just warm toast, 2 blankets on the floor, a cold cup of coffee no one drank. Jack sat at the kitchen table, eyes red, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Christine moved around him, not avoiding, not approaching, just with him. There was nothing to fix, nothing to say. The night had already spoken. He found the boys in the living room later that afternoon, both curled on the rug beneath a window, crayons scattered around them like flower petals. The light fell soft across the carpet, long beams of quiet. Liam looked up and reached for Jack's hand without hesitation. Jack sat down beside him, slowly, carefully, as if something holy had settled on this house and he didn't want to disturb it. He didn't speak. He just let Liam climb into his lap. Finn soon followed, and there, in that sacred hush of a room once ruled by control, he let them be close. Christine watched from the hallway for a moment. She didn't enter, didn't interrupt. She just smiled, small, tired, real, and walked back to the kitchen. She had started something, but she didn't need to own it. She only needed to keep holding space. By evening, the quiet was starting to feel like peace, until the black car pulled up, and Victoria stepped out. Jack's mother hadn't visited since Melissa's funeral. Too many headlines, too much grief, too many reasons to stay safely distant. But now, with stories spreading and photos still circulating, she'd arrived. Silver hair pinned tightly, pearls like armor, shoes that didn't tolerate carpets. She walked into the house without knocking, the kind of entrance built from old money, old pain, and a voice that had always been listened to. Christine was in the kitchen with the boys, washing grapes. Victoria stopped in the doorway. "This is the woman?" Christine turned. "Hello." Victoria didn't answer. She turned to Jack instead, her voice sharp enough to chill the room. "You've let this go on long enough." Jack didn't flinch, didn't defend. He looked down at the boys, Liam holding a paper towel with 3 grapes inside, like it was something precious. Victoria crossed her arms. "This is inappropriate, Jack. You know how this looks." "She's not pretending to be their mother," he said. "No," Victoria replied. "She's something worse. Confusing. Unprofessional. Emotional." Christine said nothing. She picked up a dish rag, folded it once, then again. Stillness was her defense. Jack knelt beside the boys. He wiped Finn's hands gently, then looked back at his mother. "She's the only one who didn't leave." Victoria blinked. Jack stood. He didn't raise his voice, didn't posture. He simply said the truth. "We're not trading their peace for your approval." That night the house was quiet again, but it wasn't fragile anymore. It was firm. The boys were asleep by 8. Christine sat on the nursery floor, sorting blocks and broken crayons into a small box. Jack stood by the door, unsure whether to speak. She looked up. "You didn't have to say that," she said softly. "I did." Christine smiled. Tired, kind, not triumphant. Most people don't. Jack walked in, lowered himself to the rug. His knees cracked. His tie was still on. He picked up a red crayon. "You're not most people," he said. The hallway light stayed on later than usual that night. No one said why. No one turned it off. The carpet held the shape of where they'd sat, crayon marks, warmth pressed into its fibers, like evidence that something human had happened. And though nothing dramatic changed, something quiet had. Jack had drawn his first line, not in ink, not in power, but in presence. And for the first time. He didn't look back. The headlines didn't stop, not even after the press team went silent. Not after Jack shut down interviews, declined statements, refused to spin the story. Still, the internet buzzed. Who is Christine James? A maid or a mother? Behind the Edward estate's closed doors. She ignored it, as she always had, until the letter arrived. It came folded in a plain envelope, slid beneath the back door during nap time. No name, no return address. Just one line in careful script. "We don't need your story framed. We just want the truth, and we'll give it room to breathe." It was signed by a local journalist, not tabloid, not loud, just a woman known for listening. Christine stared at it for a long time. She didn't answer right away. That evening, Jack found her in the garden. The boys were asleep. The basil had finally taken root. She sat on the bench alone, the envelope beside her. Jack didn't ask what it was. He just sat down beside her, hands folded, shoulders close but not touching. After a long silence, she finally said, "They want to tell the truth." Jack looked out across the garden, then at her. "What truth?" Christine's voice didn't shake. "That I stayed, not because I was hired to, but because they asked me not to leave." Jack nodded once. "They'll twist it," he said quietly. "I know." Another pause. "But I'm tired of being someone people explain." She looked at him then, clear, calm, brave. "I'm not their mother, but I am part of this house, and they know it. That should be enough." Jack didn't try to stop her, not this time. He reached over slowly and placed his hand gently over hers on the bench. "Then tell it," he said. "Your way." The article went live 3 days later. No pictures, no headlines, no viral spin, just a title that sat softly on the page. The work that holds the house. No quotes from Jack, no exposure of the children. Only Christine's voice. Measured, honest, quiet. She spoke of grief, of losing her parents in a fire, of raising her little sister on nothing but instinct and prayer, of silence, and staying. "I don't fix children," she wrote. "I don't replace mothers. I just stay in the room long enough for them to remember they're still loved." There were no interviews, no book deal, no follow-up. But something changed. A neighbor left a casserole at the gate. Someone dropped off sidewalk chalk and a box of strawberries. The mailman asked if Christine could teach his wife how to grow basil, and when the delivery woman brought groceries, she handed the receipt to Christine, not the security guard. Jack read the article alone twice, then a third time. When he reached the final line, he had to stop reading, not because it broke him, but because it felt like someone had handed him a mirror. He whispered the last sentence out loud just to hear it. "Love is not loud, it's what you do after the room goes quiet." That night, Christine made pasta, and the boys stirred the sauce. Finn added too much salt. Liam dropped a spoon. Nobody corrected anyone. They just laughed. Christine wiped the counter. Jack set 2 small plates at the table, and the air, once sterile, heavy, felt lived in. Later that night, Christine found a small stone on the porch, painted, crooked. A child's hand had drawn a heart in red. Beneath it, a word in shaky marker. Home. She picked it up, turned it over once, then walked inside and placed it gently on the kitchen windowsill, right beside the vase of wildflowers she hadn't bought, but someone had left without needing to be seen. Spring didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, through cracked windows, half-open doors, and bare feet on cool grass. The tulips out front bloomed sideways, crooked, wild, but they bloomed. Christine stood in the garden with the boys, kneeling in the dirt, showing them how to press basil roots gently into the soil. Liam asked why they had to leave space between the plants. Christine smiled. "So they can breathe," she said. "Even roots need room." Jack watched from the kitchen, the same kitchen that used to smell like silence and structure. Now it smelled like sun-warmed fruit and something softer. His laptop sat closed on the counter, his phone face down. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't late for anything. Later that morning, Finn brought him a crayon drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands, one tall, 2 small. Underneath in red crayon, 1 word: home. Jack didn't say anything at first. He just traced the lines with his eyes, then looked at his son. "Who's that?" he asked, pointing to the tall figure. Finn didn't hesitate. "You." Christine was folding laundry when he found her in the hallway. No makeup, hair up, a tea stain on her shirt. He held up the drawing. "He sees me." Christine nodded, eyes soft. "He's always been looking." Jack looked down at the page again, then back at her. "I've been trying to build something strong," he said. "A legacy. A future." "And?" she asked. Jack's voice was quiet. "Turns out I just had to stop building and start being." They didn't hug, didn't cry. Just stood there for a moment. 2 people who had survived something together, even if they'd never said it out loud. That evening, they ate outside. Paper plates, spilled lemonade, birdsong filling the spaces between conversations. No one was performing. No one was afraid. Christine sat on the grass, barefoot, Liam curled in her lap, Finn leaning against Jack's side, one hand tangled in his shirt, and the sound of the house, for the first time in a long time, wasn't silence. It was laughter, soft, unforced, true. After bedtime, Jack walked through the house slowly, room by room. Melissa's piano still sat in the corner, untouched, but the air around it no longer hurt. He didn't cry, didn't speak. He just rested his hand on the top for a moment, then turned off the light. In the kitchen, Christine had left something on the chalkboard, white chalk. Simple words: "Trust built here." Beneath it, Jack picked up a piece of chalk and added his name. Then slowly, he bent down, and in the corner of the board, he drew 2 tiny initials, FL. The next morning, the garden was damp with dew. Christine opened the back door, barefoot, cradling a painted rock. She placed it on the windowsill. A gift from Finn scrawled in messy red marker. 1 word: stay. And maybe that was the miracle all along. Not that things had healed perfectly, not that grief had disappeared, but that in a house once built on silence, someone stayed long enough for love to grow roots. And in the end, it wasn't about saving anyone, it was about being there. When the crying started, when the fever spiked, when the quiet came. Home wasn't built in the marble or the money. It was built in the hum of a song with no words, in the grip of a tiny hand on a shirt sleeve, in the stillness shared between broken hearts, learning how to beat again. Jack stood by the door that morning, coffee in hand, watching as the boys ran barefoot into the sunlight, Christine chasing them with a smile that didn't need permission. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like someone managing a family. He felt like someone who had one.